Here we can read Linux gaming is getting faster because Windows APIs are becoming Linux kernel features. So recently we saw that in March 2026, Linux crossed 5% of Linux user base for the first time, an all-time high for an operating system that spent 2 decades as a novelty. When it came to any kind of gaming, Microsoft's end of support deadline for Windows 10 last October pushed many users to look at alternatives. And the Steam Deck has quietly turned millions of people into Linux gamers without them really thinking about it, leading to more widespread adoption of desktop machines. Yeah, there are a lot of things working together that makes Linux grow, and and as they mentioned with this with the 5%, so that's all-time high for Linux. Most of that progress used to happen inside a piece of software called Wine, the translation layer that convinces Windows games that they are running on Windows. Valve's tuned version of Wine called Proton is what makes Steam Play and Steam Deck work. For years, every meaningful improvement to Linux gaming came from changes to Wine and Proton themselves. That's still true, but increasingly the most important changes are happening one layer deeper inside the Linux kernel. So the latest example of that is something called NT-Sync, a kernel-level driver that has offered great performance gains over previous versions of Wine, and is loaded by default on every Steam Deck that is up to date. It's very impressive with Valve how much money they have been investing into Linux and how much better they are making the gaming on Linux. So making Proton that increased compatibility and performance a lot for gaming, and now even going into the kernel to improve gaming even further. So it's quite impressive how talented they are at Valve and how much money they're pouring into this. What NT-Sync actually is. NT-Sync is a small piece of driver added directly to the Linux kernel that gives it a native implementation of a set of Windows-specific tools that games depend on to coordinate themselves. Modern games juggle dozens of things at once. While you're playing, your CPU manages the rendering pipeline, loading assets, running physics, processing audio, handling AI NPC routines, and tracking inputs, all in parallel across multiple cores. All those jobs constantly have to coordinate so they don't trip over each other. Doesn't really tell yet what NT-Sync is, but we will continue. Windows handles this coordination by using a specific set of mechanisms, and before NT-Sync, Wine had to mimic this mechanism using things like eSync and fsync, which both worked but didn't always match Windows exactly. NT-Sync builds this mechanism straight into the Linux kernel for the first time, and it means Wine doesn't have to emulate anything anymore. The developer-facing APIs calls don't actually change. Linux just knows how to answer them natively. Okay, it doesn't really explain what eSync and fsync was and NT-Sync, but some technology at least that was inside Wine that are moving into the kernel, and that gives more performance. Yeah, that makes sense. NT-Sync is part of a growing pattern. NT-Sync isn't the first time Linux has gained a new feature specifically because Windows games needed it. A few years back, Linux added a way for software to wait on several events at once, which is something Windows had built in for decades, but Linux didn't. Wine had been working around the gap with awkward tricks until the kernel finally got native support. This work is driven by Valve, by 𝗘𝗺𝗶𝗴h, so the company that employs many of the core Wine developers, including NT-Sync's author 𝗬𝗬𝗓. Okay, so it is by 𝗘𝗺𝗶𝗴h, not by Valve. And by a steady stream of contributors who want Linux to be a real gaming platform without depending on out-of-ecosystem patches forever. Yeah, really nice that they're coming together and making it so much better. These aren't magical performance gains. The headline performance gains look great, but they need some context. The eye-catching 40 to 200% FPS gains cited in NT-Sync's original benchmarks were measured against an unmodified upstream Wine, which almost nobody uses to play games on Linux anymore. Okay, I didn't know that. I thought Wine was still quite popular, but I guess it makes sense to use Proton since that's built on Wine and has had Valve's development behind it. Most Linux gamers, including every Steam Deck owner, use Proton, which already has fsync. Compared to fsync, NT-Sync's performance gains are far more modest. The games that benefit most from the change to NT-Sync are games that were really struggling before. Anything that was running at decent frame rates beforehand is still going to run fine. Valve adopted it anyway. 𝗘𝗺𝗶𝗵𝗔𝗍, an engineer at Valve, has gone on the record to say that fsync was already fast enough, And despite that, Valve still shipped anti-sync and stable SteamOS in March anyway, which speaks to the fact that F-Sync is still a workaround at its core and can be the cause of issues outside of poor raw FPS. Yeah, but even if it's a small performance gain, why wouldn't you, even if it's only 1%, and now they have developed this thing, why not just use it if they have already developed it? I think it makes sense, even if, it's not a big difference, but even if it's a tiny difference, everything helps, so why not use all help you can get to make games run faster? These own workarounds got subtle edge cases wrong in ways that produced occasional hitches, deadlocks, or weird behavior in specific games, which are bugs that don't show up on benchmark charts but can absolutely ruin individual experiences. Anti-sync fixes those at the source by matching Windows behavior exactly, and that means as soon as your favorite distro moves to the new kernel version, whether it be 𝗬𝗓𝗓, CachyOS, Fedora, or a flavor Ubuntu, they all get this much needed fix. Yeah, and awesome to hear. So gaming on Linux continues to improve by the month. Linux has grown so much in the gaming department, where there once was nothing but clever wine patches and community workarounds. Now lies support from gaming behemoths like Valve driving changes to the Linux kernel itself. But earlier they talked about 𝗘𝗺𝗶𝗹, but now it's back to Valve. Anti-sync won't be the last time a piece of Windows gets rebuilt inside Linux, because gamers need it, and with more than 5% of Steam's user base now running Linux, the incentive to keep going it has never been stronger. Yeah, that's the best part. Now it feels like maybe it can accelerate. Maybe the user base has reached like a critical point. Maybe now it makes more sense for developers to start to develop for Linux, and since more people will use Linux, there will be more games, and with more games there will be more users, so it's like a snowball effect. Hopefully, but we will see. For a long time we have really been struggling, but now it's starting to go up. So with this 5%, that's a good sign. And let's hope it continues to grow. It's nice with this kind of news that we continue to read, and I hope people are picking up on it, that gaming on Linux is much better today than it was in the past. And I think people are interested in testing Linux, both because it's more polished today, but also because Windows is getting worse and slower with more AI crap and things like that. So it's just more enticing to use Linux.